What's up, YouTube? I'm back again. And today, as you can see, based on the YouTube video title, we're going to be looking at a question that was asked to random passerbys from this channel. This channel is called It's Complicated Channel. It's Complicated Channel. I just wanted to do that. But I want to also preface by something and say this. Reaction videos, as far as I've learned about them, is to give people an opportunity to understand the perspective of another individual that they may know or like watching, who may have otherwise not said anything about a particular piece of content or information. Therefore, based on that statement, you need to react. So I'm saying this to say, I remember I looked at some very old content I did a few years back where I did a reaction video to some cheating video. And someone in the comments going to say, I'm glad there's a fast forward button. And then someone else commented and said, for real. And I'm like, look at these two stooges, Dumb and Dumber over here. You're not too bright, are you? This is a reaction video. I didn't create the cheating escapade. I didn't do it. So I'm reacting to an event that has happened already. So I have to give, to me, a decent amount of information from my perspective relative to what had happened. And sitting here looking at the video, singing Kumbaya and twiddling our thumbs together, watching the video together. Dude, you could watch it yourself, dude. You don't have to watch me watch it. Holy crap, man. The brains on these people. Holy moly. But yeah, I just had to throw that out there for any wise guys or wise women who want to waltz their asses in my damn comment section and say this stupid crap again. Thomas, man, I'm glad there's a fast forward button. Go watch it yourself then. I mean, come on, man. No one is making you watch me watch it to respond to it. You can just watch it by yourself. Holy crap. Some people are just gormless, man. All right. Gormless means stupid for those who don't know. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and watch this video. I'm only going to watch at most 3 minutes because that was as far as I went to what I wanted to talk about. And I'll leave the URL to this video in the comment section so you guys can go to the original video. I don't want no smoke from no creators. So especially these people, because these people making their own original content. So let's acknowledge that. Even though I'm adding my own original perspective, I am responding off of original content that ain't mine. So we must respect others in their efforts. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video and I'll give you my opinion.
Women often talk about hormones influencing their emotions and behavior. Why are there some women who shame men for being horny when testosterone is a male hormone?
That's a pretty good question. Why do they? And, you know, this question can actually be used for other pieces of issues that go on between men and women. Specifically, how women would shame men for dating multiple women. But for many years, when I was growing up, that was a common thing I saw amongst women as well. So when years later, as I got older, I was very perplexed to see women coming online taking giant glistening shits on the characters of random men or men that they have dated who they found out or hear about dating other women. So what? We live in a free country for the most part. And in regards to dating, for the most part, we live in a free country. And last time I checked, just like women waltz around dating other men, multiple men, got this dude over here for food, got this dude over here to sleep with, got this dude over here to take her out to movies. I remember there was a post where a girl, this was like, I want to say 2021, 2022. I remember it was during the summertime. I'll never forget. I was sitting on the couch and I believe this post was done on Facebook. And I can't remember who the woman was. I don't think it was anyone popular. It was just, some people go viral for stuff. So she made a post where it was these hand-drawn characters or art characters, and each character was a male. And above each male, someone may remember this, whoever watches this video may remember this exact post I'm talking about, but above each male was like a text box, and it described what his purpose was that benefited the woman who made the post. And it was like 5 dudes. And I remember one dude was like, he's used for food, he's used for sex, he's used for sex as well, he's used for comforting, and if I'm going through an emotional bad day. It was all this stuff. And I remember it caused an uproar amongst the community of men, because this was one of the few moments where women were starting to pick up the train, for lack of better phrasing, when they started to be way more direct about how they were using men within the dating market. And so I remember that post went crazy viral. A lot of men were responding to it, male content creators, especially in the dating realm. Men were a mix of offended, shocked, and at least for the red pill men, they was like, I ain't surprised. But I remember a lot of them were befuddled or just kind of taken aback, because it started to really unveil that the leftover perspective that young men and older men had amongst women regarding their, for lack of better words, purity or innocence was completely blown out the window. Because now you have women openly expressing and acknowledging that this is what they were doing. Granted, for the all police, obviously not all women do it, but for the people who understand that that's implied, this kind of took some men aback, and many men were offended, because now they're looking back in their past and they're starting to connect some dots hither and thither and saying, you know what? And then they're like, that motherfucker. You know what I mean? That's where that started to happen. So at least that's how I've processed that whole ordeal when it came out. So she obviously didn't answer the question too, by the way. Did she?
Because men are always horny. Come on.
Yeah, I remember she didn't really answer the question. That men are always horny. First of all, there's no absolutes. I've read stories about, there are things in the world that tend to lean very closely to being an absolute or is an absolute. But in regards to human behavior, you can go ahead and take always and never and put it in a bag and go throw it in a dumpster, because it's very almost, I don't even think it's possible. I mean, it is possible for someone to always do something, but it requires that human to behave in such a way consistently. I've always understood always being that even in your past, you done it. So if a baby didn't read a book and it's from the day it was born to now, then it didn't always do. Then that individual, even as an adult, didn't always read books. They just now started reading books at whatever time frame that they started doing it. So men are not always horny. I've read stories about men who, women who talked about their husbands who barely wanted to sleep with them. Not because they did anything, as far as I understood from the story, but rather he just had a lower libido in comparison to his wife. There you go. So men can't be always horny. And honestly, a lot of people also understand that usually as men get older, their libido tends to wane. So they're not as pressed, for lack of better phrasing, to want to have sex. Not that they wouldn't like it with the right women, but just that it's not coming to them as hard as it used to when they were younger. So anyways, she didn't answer the question. Next.
Definitely run on hormones myself, so I don't shame men. So I can't answer this question.
Good on her. Nobody should be shamed. for anything, especially biological behaviors. I don't see the point in doing it. It's a very waste of someone's time to even do all that.
Shame is a strong word, and shame sometimes can be warranted if men are being inappropriate. I think.
So let's stop. We're gonna have to chop up a lot of what she's saying, because I recall this young lady having a more longer-winded statement. So her first part of the statement, I'm gonna write it down real quick on my little notepad here. Her first part of the statement was, shame is a strong word. And then she went to say, but it could be warranted to shame men in particular if they're acting inappropriate. Now, the problem becomes the question, what is defined as inappropriate? Because we have, by definition, common belief what is considered inappropriate. It is inappropriate to walk outside butt naked unless you're on some nude beach. These are common knowledge for the most part. But then we have individualized visions of what people consider inappropriate as well. What she may think is inappropriate to her for a man to do, I may not think it was. So this again is one of those moments where women are doing their effort to explain and express what they're thinking and feeling when they're asked and they're trying to be honest. However, they're still leaving a level of mystery, whether it's intentional or not, because that is also a mystery. What she may think is inappropriate, the next woman doesn't. So we can't even take her entire answer as a strong or moderately strong data point when we're looking at all the answers regarding this question. I would want a woman who was being very specific and very clear about every aspect of her answer. This leaves a level of mystery. So in case you didn't catch that, that leaves a level of mystery there. But let's hear the rest of what she had to say.
A lot of times men use having more testosterone as a scapegoat to acting inappropriately. But I think, biology.
So she's shifting. She's about to make a new statement. Didn't mean to stop it on that part of the frame of the video, but it is what it is. So a lot of times, she said, a lot of times men use it as a scapegoat. Testosterone is a scapegoat. I'm going to be honest. This is just my anecdotal observation. I've hardly have ever heard men do that. The only men I've ever heard use this testosterone, I haven't even heard men explicitly mention this testosterone as a justification. Maybe it was implied. I can't honestly recall, so I'm not going to definitively fight against that statement. I will say that it's possible. There's a probability that there are men who do that in comparison to the total male population, but I don't know about how frequent. What we do know, or to a degree we know, without adding any statistics here, is that women definitely do it. Oh, absolutely. In comparison to men, I have greater recall of women, by and large, justifying their behaviors based on a mix of hormonal and other, which is more so an internal factor, which is within them, and then also external factors like, well, you were too busy for me, type of thing. So while I struggle to recall for men, and this is not me trying to be biased, that just reflects how infrequent it was for a man in question to express their testosterone as being like a flat out factor for why they are cheating. Most time I've usually, to kind of fill in the blank there, I've usually heard men throughout my life. Let's use the example of a relationship. If a guy cheated, I've usually heard one of the many things is the guy saying that it was because she wasn't giving him sex. So they didn't say anything about their libido, and they didn't talk about hormonal things. They just simply said, my wife and or my relationship partner has failed to give me sex at a rate that would have kept me from wanting to cheat. You know, granted, cheating here is not being justified. So for the people who feel the need, cheating, whatever, man. We're not talking about the cheating in this context. We're worrying about her statement. So, yeah. I've heard about men saying that at more of a competitive rate when you're comparing that to women who did express their hormonal behaviors as hormonal changes as reasons for their behavior. I've heard pregnant women express their hormones as reasons why they cheated while they were pregnant. I've heard women who have, I guess, like drastic hormonal changes during their period or leading to their period that they ended up cheating. You know that week-long phase where they're ovulating. Some women will be like, well, my husband didn't give me enough, or my partner didn't give me enough sex. They was giving me sex, but not enough, so I cheated. You know, that's, again, you're implying your hormonal changes as justification for why you did something that you had no business doing. So let's hear the rest of what she said, because she was about to shift to her next part of the answer.
It plays a big role, and that is something to be said of why a lot of things are different between men and women, but it's never an excuse.
So the last part, she was saying that biology does play a significant role, but it's never an excuse, and she was speaking in the context of men, to justify it. But she didn't entirely answer the question, because the question was leaning to a more so of a comparison, and specifically saying more so it was more so pointing out a double standard where women want to shame men for, some women want to shame men for excusing their hormones, the ones who do, testosterone specifically, for why they may behave a certain way sexually. And they were trying to ask that in comparison to women who, by and large, want to be acceptable of women justifying that, or just people in general. So she didn't really answer the question either. So next.
To act bad.
Females, when they get horny, they seek attention, they seek to feel something, they seek something out of somebody. Especially with females in my generation, I feel like that's the main go-to they have. Now for guys, I'm gonna just keep it honest, we just want to get our stuff out. We want to let our stuff out. We don't care to put our heart into nobody else.
Are men more thirsty for sex?
That's at least the second half. I would have to think more in the first half, and I don't want to spend too much time thinking about it. The second half of what he said specifically about guys' reason, tends to be a very common reason, even when they don't say it most time. But I don't speak for all men. The same people who tend to be all polices, they tend to take answers as binary, meaning all or nothing. So just because I'm speaking about men doing something doesn't mean I mean all men either. For you all police haters, but y'all double standard haters over there.
Or are women more thirsty for attention?
Ooh, wait, I didn't hear the whole thing.
Men more thirsty for sex?
Out. We don't care to put our heart into nobody else.
Are men more thirsty for sex, or are women more thirsty for attention?
Ooh. That's a tough one.
You know, women definitely like attention and affection, you know, and men, I guess because of how we're built, our testosterone, I think we have a strong, hunger and desire for sex. I think it's just, I don't know, I guess God wired us that way. I don't know why, but sometimes I guess you have to ask the man upstairs.
Which one is more of a biological?
Interesting. That is a great question. Honestly, the best way I can phrase my answer, I would have said that it is competitive between the two. Who's doing more of what? And I only say that because it's not like I have the stats in my mind to know for a fact. And I haven't found any research on that yet, analysis results. So from my perspective, I would have just simply said the outcome is competitive. The results is competitive between the two. So it could be just as often that men are thirsty for sex in comparison to, what was the question? Let's go back a bit. I want to make sure I'm being accurate with my response.
I'm gonna just keep it honest. We just
Are men more thirsty for sex, or are women more thirsty for attention?
Okay, yeah, thirsty for attention. I was about to say women being thirsty for sex, but yeah, the comparison, you will first have to know the numbers between those two to even know who would really definitively. But clearly, he just want to see maybe their opinion. But my answer would try to be as close to what reality would be, and that the results is competitive because we have just as much there's enough men and women who have enough life experience on this planet who can who can say men are very thirsty for sex in general. And there's just as much of that when it comes to women being thirsty for attention, or is also potentially equal, or if not more amounts of women who are thirsty for attention. And social media is an example of that. The rate at which women post videos and just anything online is higher than men, and I do know that. I can't recall the numbers, but I do remember reading a research results that said that women do spend a higher rate of time on social media platforms and interacting on those platforms than men. But men still performed on those platforms at a decent rate. It just wasn't as high as women. So one can argue attention being use that as a segue to suggest women are strongly more spend more time desiring attention as much as men, but it wouldn't be that wouldn't be enough to justify that. But comparison between the two, yeah, you would first need to know the rates of those specific numbers, individual, and then compare the two. So,
Ooh.
Let me move back up. Let me see here. It was around here.
I guess you have to ask the man upstairs.
Which one is more of a biological need?
The sex, probably.
Attention, females, attention.
Which one is more of a biological need?
I feel like sex is more of a biological need. You feel me?
So why is one any more shameful than the other?
Because in female eyes, that's the only thing men cherish is sex. You feel me? So they feel like if it's not sex, it's not a relationship.
Why is male heterosexual?
I get his answer, but he didn't really answer the question. So why is one more? So he thinks that attention is greater than men desiring sex. I don't know that, but I will say he answered the question, but to say that women perceive to their eyes, they see that men only cherish sex. I can't say yes or no to that, but I will say that my perspective is that women tend to women tend to prefer double standards. I will say that. And I only say prefer because anytime throughout the past few years alone, you can see online how when men decide to do the same thing, women have pushed back, or a collection of women have pushed back, meaning that it's not all women, but there's a decent collection of women who have some type of presence online who decides to create one, having pushback on the very men doing things that when I sit there and think about it, I say, ironic. You're crapping on men doing this very thing that I had to go through many times with women. Ironic. And I've heard my friends had to go through. When again, going back to the example of dating multiple people. At one point in my life, I only dated one person at a time. One. So when I was dating a girl, I literally wasn't talking to nobody else. But here's what happened. The first 4 to 5 women that I dated early in my earlier years, they used that against me, and I walked away brokenhearted because they were over there messing with other dudes or like, for example, I remember one girl would say, this other guy's asking me for my number. What you gonna do about it? And it's just like, first of all, what do you want me to do about it? I remember asking that question back, but then it was also, it's like, okay, we not in a relationship yet. So I remember in my mind being reasonable about that. But at the same time, it's like, why are you throwing this in my face? You could have just handled it however you was going to handle it without my knowledge. So, because I wasn't, it's not like she was obligated to tell me. That was my thought process. But yeah, I've had, these were with women who we were kind of in that phase of dating people would say kind of exclusive level ish, before exclusive dating statements were kind of a thing as widespread as it is now. And so I remember being very hurt many of those times. I'm not going to sit here and be disingenuous about that. I remember being very hurt, and I remember complaining to my mother about it. And she was like, hey, she said my name. I ain't going to say my name, but she was like, hey, her suggestion or her solution was, why don't stop dating one person at a time, putting all your eggs in one basket. Why don't you date more than one person? And she would tell you, my first response to that, like instantaneously, was no. I don't want to do that. That don't make any sense. That's how I thought about it. I genuinely thought that didn't make sense, and I didn't want to do that. But as time went on and I kept getting drop kicked in the face by women doing this and getting my feelings hurt, I said, you know what? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing again, expecting different results. Since I keep getting the same result and I haven't got a different outcome, as persistent as I was, I said, I'm going to just try out the other solution. So I tried it out. And when a girl played in my face, I wasn't as hurt as much. So I ended up sticking with that approach because it felt better to my peace and my psyche. So I don't keep getting hurt unnecessarily by people who, one, I'm not even committed to them yet in a relationship. But two, they're not making it seem like we're getting to that point or we're exclusively dating or whatever, but then they flip the script on me later because they meet some other dude. So it kind of protected me to a degree from that level of continued emotional or mental damage. So yeah, let's continue.
Sexuality is so stigmatized, while gay and female sexuality is celebrated.
Ooh.
You said male heterosexuality is stigmatized? In what way?
Again, I think that that's wrong. I think that male sexuality is celebrated and that female sexuality is what people are like afraid of.
She lost me and didn't lose me here. I do get what she's saying. Let's try to look at it through the lens of a young woman. 4 years, I remember, all right, so I'm going to use an example. I remember I went on a date with a woman and she told me in her past, she used to sleep with a ton of women for some change, way of living, essentially. Had a whole pimp and everything. And if you looked at this person, you would have just thought that was not the case. Maybe she had a few dudes under her belt, but you wouldn't have thought that, and you wouldn't have thought she had slept with as many that she told me. You want to know what my response was? I said, oh, okay. That was it. And her response to me was a question where she said, you're not mad? You're not about to judge me? I said, I'm not in the business of judging people. That was your business. That was what you did. I said, I like to treat people the way I want to be treated. I don't want people judging me, so I'm not going to judge you. I said, if I had opinions on it, I keep them to myself. Especially if they're negative, I was like, but if you ask me about them, I'll tell you my thoughts on it, but I'm not going to just blatantly just be disrespectful. And then she went to tell me, I guess because she got a bit more comfortable about the topic, she went to tell me that she said, majority of the men, except for me so far, has, like, right after they heard that, went straight to shaming her. Oh, you the H word, the WH word, and you were or and all this other stuff. And I said, yeah, that's just not acceptable to me. Men are not perfect creatures either. I think that men do just as many egregious things in life that at least in relative to dating and women, in comparison to women. So again, I don't want to be the person throwing stones at somebody when they got clearly a bunch of ammo against me too, as just being a male person. So to judge her, now what I decide to do relative to what you used to do, hey, it's fair game. You know what I mean? Like, that just is what it is. But I'm not going to sit here and insult you for that. So I do see from her lens, there is a pattern of behavior, and she's not the only one. I've heard other women talk about, at least the ones who's being genuine, about this type of behavior from men who would spending time insulting women and stuff like that, for them practicing their own sexual freedom that they always, well, I ain't gonna say always had, but have had for many years, but maybe just did not feel as comfortable to experiment relative to men. Or if they did, they had to be a lot more on a hush hush between each other about it, because they knew men typically would spend their time insulting. So I do see it from that lens. However, so yes, in the sense of men, by and large, a man could say something like that and most men nor women would spend their time judging him. That is true. I haven't even, I remember hearing a dude say that he messed with like 100 plus girls to women, and women didn't have the same negative reaction. They didn't spend their time insulting the guy. But again, how they moved with him was still their decision. That's fair game. So if a girl heard that and said, oh, okay, well, I ain't about to really be worrying about trying to be serious with this guy, or I'm not gonna let my feelings get caught up, that's her deciding how she was gonna move with him. But I didn't hear a lot of women insulting, at least throughout my life, men at the same rate or at the same degree for men doing that. So I mean, now I tend to hear it a tad bit more often because, social media and everybody got a voice now. So I start to hear it now. But before all that widespread stuff, I honestly didn't hear it as much. So I've still heard more often men doing it towards women, though. Even in movies, even in movies and TV shows, again, like I said in the previous video, movies and TV shows, from my understanding, tend to be a reflection of what's common in society. And I've seen it in movies and TV shows, men will judge the women openly for carrying a similar behavior or practicing a similar behavior that men do as well. So, yeah, I'll throw her a bone on that one.
One key that opens a lot of locks is a great key, and one lock that opens for any key is a bad lock. Like that phrase, I think that it's morally wrong, and I don't think that it really... I think that men are allowed to be more sexual than women.
Why are there slut walks for women and pride marches for gays?
All right, so I don't care about that last question. So we're going to go back to this last young lady who answered this question. So I do remember hearing a trope like that. The more I hear it, the more I do see the double standard in that statement. But so first, I'm going to tell you what I think now. Well, let me rephrase that. Not now. I'm going to tell you my initial thoughts on this, right? There's a piece of me who think that, yes, that is double standard. If I was to be objective, that is a double standard statement. So rather than it being morally wrong, I think that's the wrong use of that term phrasing there. It would be more so just unfair for a better statement for what she's trying to express about that. So that's how I directly think about it. Factually speaking, that is a double standard statement because it's implying that men can have the freedom to, or it should be acceptable, or it is acceptable for men to sleep around, the key being the man's you-know-what, and the locks being the women's you-know-what. But on the flip side, a lock that any key can open is a bad lock. Yeah, I don't know. That obviously shows double standard there, because you're basically saying women shouldn't have the ability to do the same thing. Now, there's a difference between facts, social opinion, and then my opinion, or an individual's opinion. So replace my opinion with individual opinion, even though you're hearing my opinion right now. Facts is what is the outcome and the truth, right? Social opinion is socially, the opinion is what I just explained. Men, by and large, will judge women for being a lock that any key can open, but they feel that it's acceptable for, and that has been more so acceptable for a key being able to open any lock. That's the social opinion thus far. It has shifted a little bit, so don't come for me. And then individual opinion is what we all think of this. here's what I have for fact right here regarding this question and her answer. So I have some stuff that I've pulled up from the pmc.gov NIH Library of Medicine site. And these are analytical studies about these. Well, for this one, it was the risky sexual behavior and self-rated mental health among young adults. And this was in Sweden, by the way. So the study was done in Sweden. But you can clearly apply this, and to some degree, I actually agree with this being applicable to places in the U.S. or throughout the U.S. as well. So I'm not about to go and read all this like we in some English classroom practicing our speaking skills, but I'm just going to go straight to the conclusions. All right. If you want to look, I'll leave this in the comment section. If you want to spend your time looking at it, which I highly recommend it because I already did, but I'm not about to spend all that time on this video. You can, but we're going to look at the conclusion here. So again, the title of it was Risky Sexual Behavior and Self-Rated Mental Health Among Young Adults. So this is men and women. And scrolling down to the results, the conclusion was that the associations found between poor mental health factors and multiple sex partners among females warrant consideration in future public health interventions. Further research to increase the understanding of the causal mechanisms that link mental health factors and risky sexual behavior, especially multiple sex partners among young adult females, is needed to support evidence-based interventions. So let's look at the results here to see, kind of get a little bit more of an idea what they was talking about in the conclusion. Generally, male participants rated their depression and anxiety levels considerably lower than their female counterparts. Poor mental health, high depression, and high anxiety scores levels were significantly associated with having multiple sexual partners among, and there's a typo there, among female participants. Adjusted odd ratio. I'm going to explain to you what odd ratio is, but let's just go to the point. However, findings among males were not statistically significant. Furthermore, overall results indicated that higher depression and anxiety scores were associated with 1.4 and 1.6 higher odds, respectively, of not using condom with a sexual partner in the most recent sexual encounter. Similarly, higher anxiety scores were associated with non-condom use in the latest sexual encounter, AOR. I think that's annual odd ratio. I don't know what the A stands for, but I know OR stands for odds ratio. But no significant gender-specific association were found. So they didn't really found any significant gender associations, but they did still say that male participants that they had in Sweden rated their depression and anxiety levels lower, considerably lower than their female counterparts. And they said poor mental health, high depression, and high anxiety scores were significantly associated with having multiple sexual partners among female participants. So for the women, having multiple sexual partners, at least with this results, expressed that there was a significant association with that and having poor mental health, high depression, and high anxiety scores. So that's just one example. This is one result. I have another one. So this one is, the title is The Relationship Between Multiple Sex Partners and Anxiety, Depression, and Substance Dependence Disorders, a Cohort study. Let's see here. I kind of want to read the abstract, but what was this? Where was this study done at? They didn't explicitly say it. So this study investigated the effects of multiple heterosexual partners on mental health, specifically whether higher numbers of partners were linked to later anxiety, depression, and substance dependency. Oh, this was done in New Zealand. So again, this was not in the US. All right, so they did. So essentially, I'm gonna tell you what they did. So the relationship between numbers of sex partners over 3 age periods, 18 to 20, 21 to 25, and 26 to 32 years, and diagnosis of anxiety, depression, and substance dependence disorder at 21, 26, and 32 years were examined using logistic regression. I will explain to you what logistic regression is for the people who don't know, because a lot of people don't read today. Now, let me go down a bit. The association was stronger for women and remained after adjusting for prior disorder. For women reporting 2.5 or more partners per year compared to 0 to 1 partners, and then they tell you to adjust the odd ratio. So what that statement essentially said that, they kind of clarified it here anyway, so I'm not even going to use my own critical analysis here, but they essentially said this study established a strong association between the number of sex partners and later substance disorder, especially for women, which persisted beyond prior substance abuse and mental health problems more generally. The reasons for this association deserves investigation. So what does that statement mean? Again, just like the previous one, there is a association between a woman having a higher number of sexual partners. They were more specific here, 0 to 1 compared to 2.5 more partners per year, and reported depression, anxiety, or even substance abuse. So while, again, let's go back to the point that I was talking about regarding what she was discussing, or her answer. Again, the fact, what I just read, those two studies that I just read, leans more into a fact so far, right? Their findings of fact is that there is a strong association between women who have multiple sex partners and them having depression, anxiety, higher dependence on substance abuse, etc. But it was lower for men. So I essentially just supported the argument where men will say things like, women cannot do everything that men can. And this is one of those cases where, in a sense, yes, they can. A woman can wake up tomorrow and bang 100 dudes if she wants. That's fine. However, her emotional and mental outcome is more likely, based on the association argument between these two studies, to take a hit than it would be for a man who banged 100 women. That's essentially what they've expressed there. And I kind of want to explain, understanding logistic regression analysis and stuff like that. I think this stuff is important because far too often people spend their free time reading data. I think a great example, again, is the Black Americans data for crime data from the FBI database. It's not even just done on Black Americans, it's done on all races. But people like the Kirk, and I'm just going to say his last name, would read his data. Even racist people read this data, and they're like, see, relative to your population, you got this many crimes. And that's not the case, because there is a lot of false positives in that database. Because first of all, historically speaking, until this day, Black men and women are disproportionately profiled and arrested at a higher rate compared to white people in America. That database tracks all arrests. So it's not just all crimes, it's also all arrests. If you took that number of arrests and you try to make a fact-based argument off of it, you will be completely wrong, first of all. Also, your analysis of the data will be wrong too. But if you was just trying to make an argument on it, on like, let's say, oh, you guys have this number of arrests relative to your population, you would be an idiot. Because first of all, the number of arrests is not reflective to a person committing a crime. There are people in all races in America who were arrested, but they didn't get put in a database for committing any crime. And there's no explicit distinction of those two. Also, clearance is also a data point in that database, meaning I can't remember what clearance is, but I'm gonna say off the top, it was more so what crimes that were cleared, but don't take my word for it. I'll have to go back and look. But that is also a factor that's in there. So just speaking on arrest, because that's a little bit more clear for the audience and myself here. If you was to run off of that number and try to make an argument against the Black population, or any population for that matter, white population, Asian population, it doesn't matter, you will sound like an idiot. because you're trying to make a fact-based argument on data numbers that have false positive in them. So if you try to claim that, okay, so let's say, how many black Americans is it in America right now? Or in the United States? 49 to 52 million. So let's go with the higher number of 52 million, right? So there's 52 million black Americans in America. And let's say you decided, okay, well, I'm a racist bigot and I want to make a claim. This is what they do. And they say something along the lines of, they look at FBI database and they're like, for specifically black people, and they're like, man, they got 20 million arrests. So they committed 20 million crimes in 2019. You guys have so many crimes relative to your population. You would sound like an idiot. Because that 20 million arrests is not, there's not a one-to-one association between the 20 million arrests and 20 million crimes. First of all. Secondly, even in those arrests, not everybody committed a crime or was labeled for a crime. Thirdly, even if you was arrested, you may got unarrested right there. They may not, they may still put it in the database, but you technically was arrested and not arrested. That's not really a data point, but that's a thing. Someone can arrest you, put you in a car, and then they decide to take you out the car and not arrest you, but they may still report that. So we don't know everything that police officers do and don't report, or when they do and decide not to report. And it seems to be a mixture of up to the discretion of the police officer and not up to the discretion of police officer. So if they truly did make an arrest and they take you to a jail cell, they're obviously going to report it. But if they arrest you, put you in the back of their cruiser, but then they unarrest you and take you out your handcuffs, I would think that's more up to the discretion if they still want to mark you as being arrested, which would be messed up. But that has also happened historically with the black people. So again, just want to also destroy that argument again for the second video. But yeah, regarding the modern dating thing, yeah, these questions, a lot of them these people didn't really answer it, at least so far. Not saying that's an indictment on this video, but more so that modern dating and women, it is complicated, at least to them, because it's not that complicated for men. But hey, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. See you.